So, talking about the human resource system and payroll accounting systems, there is quite a bit of crossover. The human resource side has a lot of things that they need to document that impact the payroll accounting system as well. Historically, we've seen a separation between the two, with payroll accounting falling with traditional accounting. But we are starting to see much more an integration and a movement of the payroll accounting department into the human resource department. This is definitely more efficient and effective and results in less things being duplicated in multiple departments. In some companies, all of them are the same thing. It really just comes down to the size of the organization and how they're structured. One of the things that we can really be thankful for is that there are a lot of individual different types of computer programs that now allow us to integrate the information we need from both sides into the same source. So this is things like attendance, what the retirement benefits are, health insurance coverage. Technology is really aiding us a lot. However, this does not negate the need for us to understand how things work. To meet all kinds of federal and state requirements, there are many different payroll records and many documents that must be obtained and retained by the company. The payroll department performs the accounting functions, but it really is a derivative of human resources, because so many of the things the accounting department needs to ensure are happening require backup from the human resource department. So in some of our really big businesses, even some of the mid-sized businesses, there are procedures, and those are actually written down procedures that apply to everything from recruiting new employees all the way to terminating personnel. FLSA has some really strict personnel record keeping requirements, and those are then embodied into the HR system to ensure compliance. Some of these include the job description. It must be clear and accurate and must be made available. Requisitions for personnel would notify HR for the need of a new employee. And then the application for employment would be completed by the person who is seeking employment. There are some pre-hire things that you can or cannot do. Inquiries can include questions on gender, national origin, criminal background, etc. if there's a bona fide occupational reason. If there is not, they cannot include those questions. If there's a background check that occurs, that has to be in compliance with the Fair Credit Reporting Act. You would need to have the documentation for this compliance. Any type of aptitude or psychological testing is only considered lawful if it's related to job performance. And employers must keep applications for 1 year. A lot of times, before somebody is actually hired, we will call their references. This is a reference inquiry. If we are conducting one before employment, as a result of a lot of litigation that has occurred in this area, respondents can really only verify facts, dates of employment, wages, things of that nature. But they cannot provide subjective information, such as, was this person good at their job? Was this person very friendly? Things like that. Most of the time, a respondent is not going to provide any information. This, though, has resulted in a loss of credibility to the reference inquiries. To offset that, what some places are doing is that they're requiring applicants to sign what's called an employment reference release. This would allow the hiring company to provide that release to a prior employer, saying that they are free to divulge subjective information. Does not mean that as a prior employer you have to. You can still choose not to. This is an area that being in a litigious society has been not advantageous to some degree. If, for example, you are going to run an investigative consumer report or a credit report, you have to notify the employee before. They need to be aware as a part of the hiring process that this report will be ran. Once an employee has been hired, a hiring notice would alert your payroll department to a new employee. This allows them to get added properly to the payroll and start the process of compiling and aggregating all the different documents and information that are necessary in order for you to do your job as a payroll professional. From an HR aspect, the employee history record would have things like their performance evaluations, their compensation adjustments, disciplinary issues, performance appraisals, all of these different things that relate to employment and may be absolutely necessarily in the event of an employment-related litigation as a form of backup and source documentation for the actions of the employer. I cannot stress enough, document. Have a good history, have everything in the records. Because when it comes down to it, and it's a he said, she said, courts often will lean more towards the employees if there is no documentation from the employer's side. There are other forms of documentation that continue to exist in different types of internal transactions. Just make sure that as a professional, you are maintaining the things you need in order to represent, illustrate, and potentially defend your actions. Anytime that there's a change in the payroll, in the rate, things like this, you would also want to have accurately documented. This would be perhaps with a appraisal, a performance appraisal, could be just a annual compensation adjustment for a cost of living adjustment, otherwise known as a COLA, whatever the case may be, that documentation should exist. That change in payroll rate form would also be applicable to the accounting system because they would need to change the amount that your employee is being paid on a per hour or on a salary basis. When it comes to termination of an employee, it's really important that you have all your ducks in a row. If an employee has a contract with promises in it in regards to employment, termination should have good cause, and you would want to have that documentation in place to illustrate good cause. There are some states that are at will, and at will employees can be discharged for any reason as long as it's not discriminatory. If there has been a mistake in the handling of an employee historically, and some companies actually go this route in that they get legal advice before they engage in a termination. And sometimes that legal advice can include, okay, well, here are some documents that we want them to sign. That can happen oftentimes with the termination of a high-level executive, the restricting the things they can do. Sometimes it'll offer a package with it saying that, okay, we will provide X, Y, and Z. certain things with your termination, and you will not disclose this, you will not do that, you will do this, you will not do that. There's a bunch of different things that can happen, but when you are in the consultation with a lawyer, it is all for the protection of the company. And that is so that the company is protected operationally and protected potentially from lawsuit liability. The final subject in this particular chapter really does deal with the payroll accounting system. And this is what you're going to be working with for the next several weeks. And this is a system that is going to have procedures in it and methods that relate to paying your employees. There are two basic records that are part of these systems. The first is the Payroll Register. And this is a multi-column form that's used to assemble and summarize data needed at the end of each payroll period. As you can see here, it shows the identity number, the name, the hours, what's regular, what's overtime, how much per, leading to the total earnings that the employee has for that specific period. It then rolls into what the deductions are. It'll tell you what the check number is and what the net amount. So this is the amount that the employee will actually be receiving, the amount that the check is actually written for to that specific employee. This can only be compiled after hours have been recorded. So it's important that you have a good time tracking software, time cards, employees turn in their time cards. There's a lot of things that occur before the payroll register can even be compiled. Then each of these employees has an employee earnings record. And what this is an ongoing record that's updated after we complete the payroll register. We take that information and we move it over to the employee's earning records. It talks about the employee earnings per period and the cumulative earnings for each employee. This information is then used in all kinds of other reports depending upon the need. This is the type of information we use when we are replying to a child support order or a garnishment order. This is the type of information that gets provided to the state for unemployment purposes. All of these things come together. Now, once upon a time, we did all of this manually. In ledgers, books, that is how this was handled. Nowadays, I would say 98% of this is done utilizing some form of information technology that when we enter the information, it rolls everything to the things that it needs to go to. However, you do need to be aware of the different types of information that are in here, the different types of sources, what the different reports these can apply to. And finally, it's important to understand your records because most companies now are actually outsourcing quite a bit of their payroll. The small companies and mid-sized businesses will hire a payroll company like Paychex or ADP to do the processing. This independent company is typically responsible for compliance. However, as the actual employer, if something does not occur or something is reported wrong, then you still have that liability. You can reduce the risk of unpaid payroll taxes by hiring bonded providers, disallowing the provider the ability to sign tax returns, disallowing tax correspondence to be sent to the providers, and then, of course, requesting regular IRA transcripts of your company accounts. Just because you outsource does not remove all of your responsibilities. Because there is constant change in payroll law and there's constant change in employment law, the trend towards outsourcing really has gotten much, much stronger. And that outsourcing is a specialty area. These are individuals who do nothing but deal with payroll information every single day. They're not dealing with it at the points of hiring or firing an employee or discipline an employee, but it does not negate the need for you to maintain accurate and clear human resource records. All of that must continue to occur, and you need to be sure that your payroll company is actually doing the things that it needs to do, such as remitting your payroll taxes or filing your payroll reports.